talking to Professor Kristen Blossom of the SFA School of Theater, and I'm wondering what you have been doing with your students to keep the teaching and learning and making of theater going during these interesting times.
So what I developed a while ago is something called the Elements Project, and it's kind of just a prompt to get them to start writing their own stuff, because I found at one point I was directing a show and this girl was just so quiet and so quiet and so quiet. I gave her all these exercises to do and advice about projecting, and then finally I pulled her aside and I said, "Do you want to say these lines?" And she was like, "No, they sort of make me uncomfortable." I was like, oh, okay, so no matter how hard we try to help actors project, if they don't want to say the lines, they're just gonna kind of shy away from them. So what I started doing was leading my theater speech classes through a series of movements and sounds. So I play a soundtrack too for the different elements and ask them to, for instance, feel the wind on their face, feel the rain in their hair, feel the fire at a campfire or maybe a candle lit. And then if they've ever experienced an earthquake or just kind of laying on the grass, or bring them back to a time where they're doing cartwheels. And I ask them to kind of move around as these elements like become the elements, and also just listen to the elements, like let the elements speak to you. Like I feel like it's a good writing prompt. And then after I lead them through those exercises of moving around and smelling and speaking, since it is a speech class, I ask them to kind of make any noises or shout out any words that they're feeling. So like grounded, obviously, with earth, and with water, it's kind of like go with the flow, and with wind, sometimes it's tornado, sometimes it's a gentle breeze, because all of these elements have different, there's no interpretation that's correct, because the elements are forever changing. They can be destructive or they can be gentle and soft. And then after I lead them through that first element, I usually start with wind because that's kind of the easiest to get everybody comfortable with. I have them then write whatever wind is saying, whether it be a character that they came up with for wind, or a part of themselves that is kind of like the wind, or just what the wind feels like. There's no right or wrong in this, and I think that's something really important to teach to theater students, that when you're being creative, there's no right or wrong. And so then we go to the next element, we move through all four elements, and they have time to journal about all four. And what I ended up doing is a Zoom session with me describing the elements and them moving around with me. And I was playing the soundtracks of water rushing, for earth, it's kind of just like a low rumble sound. And then they would write out the poem and email it to me, and I would put it all up on D2L, put everybody's poems up on D2L. And then the ending project is they take everyone's poems and they pull lines that they like from each of the poems, and give the credit to the person who wrote that. And I actually did combine my two theater speech classes because I have two sections, because it was just turning into such a beautiful thing. I think right now, a lot of my students have emailed me about struggling with anxiety and depression during this quarantine. It's mental health challenging. And so they have been pouring out so much emotion into these poems. And I just said, you know what? It doesn't have to be memorized for the final, because you guys are still going, like stuff is still pouring out of you. So just take from your classmates. It's going to be a joined poem for both theater speech sections, and everybody's is going to be different, but we're all going to be pulling from the same material. so that we all kind of get a feel for how everyone's doing, which is sometimes not that great right now in quarantine. And a lot of students have really put vulnerability into their writing. And for the first time in my life, I actually shared my elements poems, just like a brief little line like, "Wind, why are you always blowing me around in different directions? And fire, you push me and you nudge me and you push me forward constantly, and I hate you, but please never leave because you keep me going and getting better." And so for their final, they're going to take bits from everybody's poems and then read it. And like I was said in the beginning with, would you want to be saying these lines? They are in love with these poems. So they do want to be saying these lines. And I don't have to do a whole lot of like, please speak with more volume or articulate, because they automatically get passionate and sometimes brought to tears by what they've written and what their classmates have written and how they know that they're not alone during this time. And I just think it's so beautiful and so intimate, and it's a safe space for them to share together, and they all feel safe putting these poems on D2L. Like no one's had any like, oh, it's kind of personal, please don't put it on it. Like they got to know each other in the beginning of the semester, so by the end they all felt really safe and vulnerable enough that they knew that we would be supportive of them whatever they wrote. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the final product next week for the finals, and they're all going to record themselves speaking it, which is really great practice for self-submissions, for auditions, you know, getting a blank backdrop and making sure that your audio is clear and your lighting is good. And then I want to piece together like a little montage of bits and pieces of them reading their poems, because it's just such a beautiful way for them all to come together, even though they're in their own rooms all day long with their families.
Yeah, very interesting to ponder the unifying qualities of what you're describing. I'm trying to picture it as you talked about that initial phase of the very intense and specific imagining of the elements. I was picturing the students moving in a studio rather than working remotely. Is that when or where that happened?
Whenever, no, they did this in quarantine. And I just say, try to push your bedroom furniture aside and ask everybody in the most polite way possible to not interrupt you.
Okay.
And because I've been teaching my acting lessons remotely too, and I say, warn your family that if you scream or like start crying, nothing's wrong. You're simply having an acting lesson.
Mm.
And if you don't have the Wi-Fi access, which unfortunately like 2 students of mine are like, my Wi-Fi is crazy because my brother and sister take Zoom elementary classes all day. And so I've said, okay, then just here's some of what I said about earth, water, wind, and fire. Like go ahead and sit outside when it's windy one night and hear the air and the trees and just write down whatever speaks to you. Like there's no wrong way to do this.
So I'm getting a clearer picture a little bit. Are the students at a distance from their computer or device that you're seeing their full body, or are you looking at talking heads when you're watching their work?
I'm mostly like, I'm moving around too, so I'm not watching them. I just read the poetry that they've written afterwards,
See.
which is always beautiful.
It was interesting to hear you talk about the students channeling the difficulties of this unique time in our lives into their creative work.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if we want to describe that as some sort of advantage of uh, this time when we have to be so distant, if not isolated, but has it opened opportunities for creativity that as a theater teacher you might not otherwise have evoked from the students?
I think so. I think it's been therapeutic for them. Not everyone that age has an outlet yet. Like, I paint and do yoga and write songs, and that's my outlet for anxiety and stress. And when I'm introducing them to this, they're like, oh, I feel so much better. And I'm like, this is called an artistic outlet. So I think that they're learning that this sort of art can be extremely useful in a time of just when the future is totally unknown and things are scary. You can free write and move around. Like, I still do a lot of yoga with them, and just, let sighs out, let healthy screams out. Like, it's not ideal. It's not an ideal situation, but I'm glad that I've been able to help them release some of the anxiety that they're feeling during this time.
You mentioned healthy screams, and since I know you're marvelously well trained as an actor and acting teacher, but I don't know if you have any training as a psychotherapist. So I wonder if there are any precautions that you have to take or boundaries that you set to ensure that the rather sensitive work you're doing is safe for the students.
Yeah, like, it will only be if they ask me, hey, I have a monologue coming up where I have to scream, or hey, I'm doing this voiceover for whatever and I have to scream. Then I teach them like the soft palate raising, the letting out air before you scream, the kind of proper body position to be in, and then your neck has to be in line with your spine. I don't like encourage them to necessarily run around screaming, because again, I'm not a therapist, and I always make that very clear to them that I'm not a therapist. But art has helped me, if I want to go ahead and pick up a monologue and do a cold read, and if I feel led organically to scream in the monologue, like if the character really calls for that, then I would like them to be able to do that in a healthy way. Like, I don't demand them to scream, but if they're doing a cold read, which was our last section, I asked them to do cold reads. And I said, if you're going to scream, here's how I want you to do it.
I wonder if the combination of that craft, the technique, with their emotional experience creates a safer space for them than if it were just sort of an encounter group
Yeah.
artistic technique.
Yeah, if it was more of like method acting, I think it might be dangerous to tap into dark emotions. But because it's like beautiful elements poems, and for their cold reads, I also asked them to do, like, if you would rather do a poem or Shakespeare, go ahead. It's I ask them to comment. I'll sometimes record YouTube yoga videos outside, and ask them to comment so I know that they watched them. And they're always like, oh, I needed this stretch, I needed this release. And I'll kind of do like, let out a sigh here, like, whatever we were feeling today, just let it, shake it off, shake it off. Let's just devote these 10 minutes to yoga, to self-care. Like, I really, in almost every D2L post, I feel like I get annoying because I talk so much about self-care. And but I really believe that that's the only thing that works in this time, and also in general, for actors, you need to learn self-care because you're going to get beaten down. You're going to get a lot of no's, a lot of harsh criticism. So with every class that I have, I implement positive affirmations and self-care and learning to love yourself. And I think that that's definitely been helping them during this time. I've had a few students reach out to me via email just saying, can you give me some tips because I'm really feeling down? And then I give them links to like my favorite positive affirmation videos that have worked for me. And I say, email me back with a list of 10 qualities that you love about yourself. And that's due tomorrow. Just because I try to keep them up. I never want it to go to a dark place.
Does all this mean that your expectations have been different? Thinking of the students' learning goals and what you thought they were going to get out of the class before we had any idea that we'd be in this situation. Have your expectations evolved because of the situation having not evolved, but sort of been revolutionized?
I do the elements with every class I have, but it's different this time, obviously. But I also say, hey, if you want to do a Shakespeare monologue, because usually I try to teach Shakespeare in my theater speech classes too, um, tune into this lesson on iambic pentameter or on learning more Shakespeare from the glossary or learning more about his plays. So I have kind of given the students an option actually for their final. They can do a Shakespeare monologue if they're really serious about acting, but I have a lot of designers and technicians in my theater speech classes, and that's why I give two options. I say we do the elements poem, or if you love Shakespeare, I will teach you everything you want to know. We can have one-on-one private sessions. So I have adapted a bit, but I love that. I just love being flexible. I like changing things based on the needs that are presented in a given circumstance. And so for those who love Shakespeare, I have given them the time and attention that they need to learn more about Shakespeare. And there probably will be about 25% of them doing Shakespeare monologues. And having learned how to look things up in a glossary and how to do the scansion and how to put it into their own words, kind of. So I provide a lot of options also in this time where I don't know the financial circumstances of students and I don't know if they have access to Wi-Fi all the time. I try to be as accommodating as possible and to assume the best. Like if someone's like, I totally missed this quiz, I'll reopen it for them because they're like, the Wi-Fi was down. I had to go to my friend's house to do Wi-Fi and I'll reopen it for them. Like, so yes, my teaching style has changed a bit. I've become a little bit more loose because I don't know and I don't want to ask, what's your financial situation? Like, I just want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm happy with the way that things have adapted. Like, I feel like it's brought a whole new level to the Elements project that I've been teaching for a while. And next time I teach it, I'll definitely tell the story of the infamous quarantine where, you know, this beautiful thing happened where everybody did it separately but together.
I have possibly two questions, but maybe only one. Let's see if it combines in your mind the way it does in mine. I'm still trying to picture exactly what these projects are going to look like ultimately, and I'm also wondering what is so unifying for the class in creating the final project. Can you handle both of those together?
Yeah, well, the first one so unifying is that they are grabbing pieces from each other's poems. So it's not all like, I just wrote this by myself. They're like, ooh, I love what so-and-so wrote. I'm going to put that in my wind portion. Ooh, I love what she wrote. I'm going to put that in this. So when my students hear the other students saying the poems, they're like, ooh, that's my piece. And someone else is like, ooh, that's my contribution. Ooh, that's my contribution. And then I'm going to make a big poem, like a master poem, including one contribution from everybody in the whole class, so that they can feel and see that master poem. And they're going to be self-tapes that I put on D2L, like click, 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 to hear everybody's poems, and or at least a few. And if you totally don't have time, just watch me doing the master one, because I've included something from everybody's, and that way they can feel special, like, oh, that's my poem. Yes, I think I answered both.
Yeah, I think you did. Is there
Yeah.
anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to describe about this process or what's going on since
Well,
the break?
the reason why I've been heavily teaching self-tapes is because, honestly, Broadway before this happened was asking mostly for self-submissions and self-tapes. And so I was like, well, what a perfect time to kind of force my actors to know how to do one before they go out there in the real world. And it's been very challenging for them. They're really quite simple steps, in my opinion, but it's challenging. And so the reason why I'm doing this last final, not on a big Zoom conference call, but on individual self-tapes, is because I want to teach that too. There are like a list of 10 rules about self-tapes, and if they want to go out and audition in the world, that's the way we're moving. And especially in New York City, they're not going to be doing cattle calls really anymore. And at the Equity Building, I used to go to the Equity Building and sit there with like 150 other people, and I just don't feel like that's going to happen anymore. Like, it's going to be a lot of self-submissions, and so I want to make sure that they know how to do that properly. And that's actually part of their grade too, is that, like, I don't have a good background right now because it's supposed to be like a blank wall, but I've talked about it until my face has turned blue, how to do a self-submission. So that's a whole other learning thing that I have added into the final, is that if you're going to do a self-tape, and a lot of self-tapes, actually, the directors prefer you holding the script here, so that they don't feel like you're glued to exactly how you memorized it, that you're still directable. And so that's why I feel like it's okay that the elements poems aren't all the way memorized, but I teach them to hold it here and not here. Just little things like that I want to make sure that they're experts at before they leave me.
Yeah. Well, I have been finding in chatting with people about these adaptations that everyone is making, that there are aspects of the need to incorporate more technology in our work, and technology-based communication especially, that really has kind of urged us into what the future would have looked like regardless, and helping our students to be prepared for that. So sounds like this is another aspect.
Yeah, I'm doing a webinar today with ATHE, the Theater of Higher Education. It's a digital learning seminar about teaching acting classes remotely. And I'm doing it today at 4, and I'm super excited to learn even more about how I can help my students on an online distance.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us about the creativity that you've applied to continue the teaching and learning and keeping your students creative and making art. It sounds fascinating and beautiful.
Cool. Thank you so much.